So here at Joe's Vax Repair and More, we're not always repairing vaxing. That's the "and more" part in the name. So, the last video repair I think I did was fixing the RAM on the VaxStation 3200. But this time I've got something a little different on the bench. Been cleaning up the house and decided to finally start repairing, all the broken things around here again, and try and get some of these things fixed up so they're not sitting around collecting dust. So this is a sump pump battery backup inverter. This is made by a company called Ion Products. This is their Storm Pro 35 AC system, or the inverter from it anyway. I think it came with a pump and a water level switch and all that stuff. It was like a complete system, and it's broke, or it wouldn't be here on the repair bench. So before I get into this, it's probably going to kind of turn into a review. So I want to kind of give my qualifications here to give some credibility to the things I'm going to say in this video. I'm an electrical engineer. I have a Bachelor's of Science in Electrical Engineering from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Aside from that, I've been basically repairing electronics on a hobby and small scale, fixing things for family members and the like, basically since I was 13. My dad's an electrical engineer. I've learned a lot from him, learned a lot from the internet, learned a lot screwing around on my own, and I learned a lot from school as well. And I'd like to think I've got a pretty good handle on electronics, how they work, and that sort of thing at this point. Through my repair efforts on a lot of different things, LCD monitors and whatever else, I've seen a number of failed capacitors, and well, that's basically what we've got here. So as I said, I'll kind of go through the too long didn't watch version of this right now. And this is Ion Products 35 AC. They don't sell this anymore. They sell a similar version today. It's a 35 ACI Plus. I don't know if that's improved. Maybe they resolved these issues in the next model. I don't really know. I can't speak to that. But this 35 AC, it failed, obviously, and it actually failed twice. I'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, obviously it's got bad caps, so I went through and made it work again, which I'll get to. But the too long didn't watch version is basically that the caps fail, and the battery charger fails to regulate at that point. It has an excessive amount of ripple on it, loses regulation, and the DC voltage it puts out ends up somewhere above 15 volts, which if you're charging a 6-cell, so-called 12-volt lead-acid battery, that's way too much voltage. And it causes failure of the battery. So this thing failed once under warranty, and then it was replaced, and then it failed again. So this is actually the second unit, and it failed in basically the same way. And as a result of that, if you're trying to keep your basement from flooding with this thing, I'd basically say you're better off buying something else if you currently have one of these. Now, like I said, I can't speak to the quality of the 35 ACI Plus, which is their current product. Maybe they fix these issues. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I can't tell you. So that's the short version. The long version is basically, starts with basically my dad at his house had a basement watchdog brand system for maybe a decade or more. It was a pretty simple system. There was a 12-volt pump that would pretty much run directly off of a large flooded cell lead acid battery, 100, 150 amp hours, something in that range. and there was just a small wall wart with a monitoring circuit and a charge circuit, you know, built into this thing that would, I think, basically trickle charge the battery and keep it topped off all the time. So after, you know, a decade or more or whatever it was, eventually the battery just failed because it was old. You know, things don't last forever. And we established that the battery didn't really have the capacity it should have at that point. And, you know, he decided to look into upgrading the system to one that would run, you know, with an inverter that would run an AC motor. I don't remember exactly what led to that decision, but that's the decision he came to. I think it had something to do with, you know, this way you can have the second backup pump still tied to the AC system in case you need the extra gallons per hour or whatever, you know, just in normal conditions when the power is still on. So he decided to buy, it was either the 35 AC or the 30 AC. It might have been the 30 AC, and then when they did the warranty replacement, they just gave him, you know, an inverter that said 35 AC on it. I'm not really sure if there's a difference there. It might be a little higher VA rating. But he bought the initial system, and I don't remember, you know, if it was 1 to 2 years later. I don't remember the warranty period on this. It was either 2 years or 3 years. The new version of this, the 35 ACI Plus, has a 3-year warranty, but it's possible this had a shorter one. But, you know, sometime not long after a year, the original inverter failed, and the company Ion Products is actually a division of a different company, Metropolitan Industries, which is kind of local here in the Chicago area. They're in Romeoville. So he actually drove to, you know, that place in Romeoville and picked up a new inverter and swapped the old one. And then about, you know, same time, sometime about a year later, the inverter failed in the same way. It might have still been under warranty at that point, but basically he didn't bother replacing it because you figure, well, if literally two failed in the same way, the third one's going to fail in the same way again. So he decided to go a different route with the backup system at that point. I think he bought an off-the-shelf inverter and built the system himself, essentially. So the failure mode here is, again, is that, you know, the inverter overcharges the battery, and that happens when the caps go bad. So, you know, at that point we decided to disassemble it. We didn't do that the first time around when it failed because, you know, we didn't want to void the warranty or anything. But these are the sorts of caps that were in here. Most of them were this YMCon brand, maybe that's pronounced Imcon, and several of these had failed. These are basically no-name brand caps. I wasn't able to really find any information on them at all. There's one other brand in here, this Knobby brand. A similar thing. Can't find really any information on it at all other than that it exists. Can't find data sheets, specs, or anything. Basically, we measured a number of these caps, and the ones that were obviously bulging had all failed. There was a 4700 microfarad cap that measured, you know, 0.2 of a microfarad. So obviously that one was basically open circuit. The other one actually measured okay. And so there were a number of them that, you know, when we stuck them on an LCR bridge, they measured high dissipation factor and, you know, way low capacitance from where they should have been. Those were primarily the ones that were obviously bulged. So, you know, having a pretty good junk pile of components around here, I was able to replace a number of these with caps that are close enough in value, maybe higher voltage. They don't really fit in here. You know, these caps are not supposed to be on this side of the board. They really go on the other side, but I didn't have the right value, the right physical dimensions, etc. So a number of them are kind of kludged in here. There's a few back here, and you know, two largish ones in here, and I kludged everything in here well enough to verify that the thing works again once you replace the caps. It doesn't overcharge a battery, and it functions properly as an inverter. So, you know, given that, I figured, well, I'll go ahead and order, you know, the $10 worth of caps to see if I can fix this thing. The one risk here is, you know, I'm working under the assumption that these Imcon caps are just like a bad brand that didn't really meet their specs, or that they were under-spec'd caps to begin with. In that the caps I ordered are going to work in here for some appreciable amount of time. Sometimes that's a good bet, sometimes it's not, because the other possibility is that the caps were actually a good brand, even though I've never heard of them before and can't find any information. You know, they may have actually been caps that met all their specs and were perfectly fine, except that they were put into a circuit that, you know, is really exceeding their ratings, causing premature failure. So given that risk, you know, basically replacing the caps in this thing, it's either going to fail in the same way again, because the caps are really undersized for what they're trying to do. You know, they're taking too much ripple current, or there's some other flaw in the circuit that tends to kill the caps. Or it's going to work fine for a long time. I don't really know at this point, and I probably won't know for another year, but you know, that basically sums up this. The only thing left to do here is, you know, order the caps, pay for them, and once they arrive, they're going to have to get installed. Other than that, there's, you know, that's really all there is to it. So, as I was kind of saying, would I trust this thing to keep a basement from flooding? Probably not at this point. Would I trust this thing to keep a computer turned on? Again, probably not. Would I trust this thing to maybe work for a low reliability application where maybe I just need 120 volts off a battery for doing something real quick? Sure, maybe. Would I trust this to be better than nothing? Yeah, probably also. But, you know, you just got to keep an eye on the thing, because if it fails, it's going to take your batteries with it, and frankly, that's the expensive part. You know, if you've got a big 100 amp hour, 150 amp hour flooded cell lead acid, it's probably a $150 or $200 battery without checking prices. You know, that's my guess. And if you let this thing break and don't notice it, and it sits there and overcharges that battery, it is going to fail. And that's, you know, a significant amount of money to put into a battery for this thing to only have it kill the battery. So this is definitely something that, even though it's fixed, it's going to need to be watched. It's good, you know, you got to look at the voltage on it every once in a while and make sure it hasn't failed. Maybe crack the case open and see if any of the caps are bulging. That about sums up everything I wanted to say in this video.